On September 3, 1996, an FBI office received a criminal complaint. The document, recently released under the Epstein Files Transparency Act, is stamped with that date. The complainant's name is redacted in the public version, but her lawyer has confirmed it: Maria Farmer. This was not the first time Maria Farmer had tried to report Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. Days earlier, on August 29, 1996, she had gone to the New York Police Department's 6th Precinct. She told them she had been sexually assaulted. She told them about a trafficking operation involving minors. She told them Epstein had stolen photographs, nude and semi-nude images she had taken of her younger sisters for her own artwork, and she believed he was selling them. The NYPD referred her to the FBI. The FBI created a file. The FBI classified the case under child pornography. Maria Farmer was 26 years old. She had graduated from the New York Academy of Art with a master's degree in 1995. She was working as an artist. She had met Epstein and Maxwell through the art world. They presented themselves as patrons. In the summer of 1996, Epstein offered Maria an artist-in-residence position at a guest house on a large estate in New Albany, Ohio. The estate belonged to Leslie Wexner, the founder and CEO of L Brands, the parent company of Victoria's Secret. Epstein presented himself as Wexner's financial manager and close associate. Maria accepted. She traveled to Ohio in May 1996. She worked in the guest house for 2 months. During that time, according to her sworn affidavit filed in federal court in April 2019, Epstein and Maxwell assaulted her. She described the assault occurring in a bedroom in the guest house. She described both Epstein and Maxwell participating. She described feeling trapped, isolated, and terrified. After the assault, Maria left Ohio. She returned to New York, but she could not remain silent when she learned what was happening to her younger sister. Annie Farmer was Maria's younger sister. She was 15 years old in the spring of 1996. She was a high school student in Arizona. Maria, wanting to help her sister, mentioned Annie to Epstein. Epstein offered to pay for Annie's education. He offered to help her visit New York and explore college opportunities. In April 1996, Annie visited New York. She stayed with Maria. Epstein and Maxwell took her to a movie. They bought her gifts. They talked about her future. Later that year, Epstein invited Annie to visit his ranch in New Mexico. Annie flew to New Mexico in the summer of 1996. She was 16 years old. She later testified that Maxwell gave her a nude massage and groped her breasts. She described the experience as confusing and violating. 5. When Maria learned what had happened to her sister, she was devastated. She blamed herself. That is when Maria went to the NYPD. That is when she went to the FBI. That is when she filed the complaint dated September 3, 1996. The FBI took Maria Farmer's complaint. The FBI created a file. The FBI classified the case as child pornography. And then, according to Maria Farmer and her attorneys, the FBI did nothing. There is no evidence that agents interviewed Epstein. There is no evidence that agents executed a search warrant for the photographs Maria described. There is no evidence that agents investigated the trafficking allegations Maria reported. There is no evidence that agents interviewed Annie Farmer. In her 1996 complaint, Maria Farmer urged FBI investigators to examine other powerful figures in Epstein's social circle. According to congressional testimony and letters from her attorneys, she specifically mentioned former President Bill Clinton and Donald Trump. She described observing a large number of young girls coming and going from Epstein's New York mansion. She described Maxwell leaving on frequent missions to recruit girls. She described Epstein showing her a security room equipped with extensive video surveillance devices focused on beds and toilets throughout the property. The FBI did not follow up. Maria Farmer received no meaningful contact from federal investigators for a decade. During that decade, according to court records and victim testimony, Jeffrey Epstein continued to abuse dozens, possibly hundreds of additional girls and young women. In May 2025, Maria Farmer filed a federal lawsuit against the United States government. The lawsuit alleges negligence and negligent infliction of emotional distress. It alleges the FBI and the Department of Justice failed to protect her and other victims. In December 2025, Congressman Robert Garcia, ranking member of the House Committee on Oversight and Government Reform, requested an investigation by the Department of Justice Inspector General into the FBI's failure to investigate Maria Farmer's 1996 complaint. He wrote, "The American public should be outraged that the FBI had information about the horrific crimes Jeffrey Epstein was committing in the 1990s, and yet failed to protect women and children for decades. That investigation is ongoing. As of February 2026, no results have been released." After Maria Farmer reported Epstein and Maxwell to law enforcement, the threats began. According to her sworn affidavit and court filings, Epstein and Maxwell learned she had spoken to the FBI. They learned she had attempted to speak to Vanity Fair magazine in 2002 about the abuse. They embarked on a campaign to destroy her reputation and her art career. They called her clients and other individuals in the art community in New York. They were ultimately successful in shutting her out of all art-related opportunities. Maxwell made direct threats to Maria's life. According to Maria's testimony, Maxwell said, "I know you go to the West Side Highway all the time. While you're out there, just be really careful, because there are a lot of ways to die there." Maria Farmer changed her name. She moved to North Carolina. For nearly 2 decades, she lived in hiding, selling antiques and restoring houses, trying to stay under the radar from the people who had threatened her life. On November 11, 2006, more than 10 years after, Maria Farmer filed her FBI complaint. FBI agents appeared unannounced at her home in North Carolina. They told her they were aware of her 1996 FBI complaint about Epstein. They said they had tracked her down because of that earlier report. Why did the FBI suddenly reappear after a decade of silence? Because Palm Beach police had finally forced federal action. In March 2005, the Palm Beach Police Department had begun investigating Epstein after a mother reported that he had molested her 14-year-old daughter. That investigation had uncovered dozens of victims. The FBI agents interviewed Maria Farmer in November 2006. She told them everything. She told them about the assault in Ohio. She told them about Maxwell's recruitment missions. She told them about the surveillance systems. She told them about the network of powerful men. But little came of it. Epstein's lawyers would negotiate a secret non-prosecution agreement with U.S. Attorney Alexander Acosta in 2008. Maria Farmer would wait another decade before she spoke publicly. The chain of events that finally led to Jeffrey Epstein's first criminal prosecution began with a mother's call to the Palm Beach Police Department in March 2005. Her 14-year-old daughter had come home from a massage appointment at a mansion on the island of Palm Beach. The daughter was visibly shaken. She eventually disclosed that she had been sexually abused by an older man. Palm Beach Police Chief Michael Ryder and Detective Joseph Riccari took the complaint seriously. They began investigating. What they uncovered was far worse than a single incident. They identified dozens of victims, all girls between 14 and 17 years old. The girls described a system. They were recruited by other girls, often friends or acquaintances, who told them they could make money by giving massages to a wealthy man. They were taken to 358 El Brillo Way, Epstein's waterfront mansion on Palm Beach Island. They were brought to a second-floor bedroom. They were instructed to remove their clothing. What began as massages escalated to sexual abuse. Many of the girls were from economically disadvantaged backgrounds, foster care, troubled homes, struggling families. They were vulnerable. They needed money. They were told the work was legitimate. Palm Beach police executed a search warrant on Epstein's mansion. They found evidence: massage tables, sex toys, photographs of naked girls. They built a case. But Epstein hired lawyers, powerful lawyers, expensive lawyers, former prosecutors, people with connections to federal law enforcement. Epstein's initial legal team in Florida included some of the most prominent criminal defense attorneys in the country: Alan Dershowitz, Harvard Law School professor; Roy Black, Miami-based attorney known for defending William Kennedy Smith; Gerald Lefcourt, New York criminal defense attorney; Jay Lefkowitz, former official in the George W. Bush administration; Kenneth Starr, former independent counsel who investigated President Bill Clinton. This was not a typical legal defense for a sex crimes case. This was a team assembled to wage war on multiple fronts. In July 2006, the Palm Beach County State Attorney's Office, led by State Attorney Barry Krischer, presented the case to a grand jury. The grand jury returned an indictment, but not the one Palm Beach police had sought. Instead of multiple felony counts related to the sexual abuse of minors, the grand jury indicted Epstein on a single count: solicitation of prostitution. Not rape, not sexual abuse of a minor, not trafficking, prostitution. Police Chief Michael Ryder was furious. He believed the state attorney's office had deliberately presented the case in a way designed to minimize the charges. He was so dissatisfied that he took an extraordinary step. He requested federal intervention. In May 2006, even before the state grand jury had acted, Chief Ryder had contacted the FBI. He formally requested a federal investigation. He provided all the evidence Palm Beach police had gathered. The FBI opened a federal investigation on May 23, 2006. The FBI assigned the case to a team of agents in the Miami field office. The U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of Florida, R. Alexander Acosta, assigned an assistant U.S. attorney named Marie Villafara to prosecute the case. Marie Villafara was experienced, competent, and determined. With the FBI's support, she began building a federal case. She reviewed the evidence. She interviewed victims. She identified additional victims' girls who had been flown from other states to Florida, which established federal jurisdiction under interstate trafficking laws. By May 2007, Marie Villafara had prepared a draft federal indictment. The indictment was extensive, 53 pages outlining charges including sex trafficking of minors, conspiracy to commit sex trafficking, interstate transportation of minors for illegal sexual activity, and obstruction of justice. The indictment named Jeffrey Epstein as the primary defendant. It also identified named and unnamed co-conspirators. Marie Villafara submitted the indictment to her supervisors. She waited for approval to proceed. She prepared for trial. Instead of approving the indictment, Acosta's office entered into negotiations with Epstein's attorneys. For several months, federal prosecutors and defense lawyers engaged in discussions about resolving the case without a trial. On July 31, 2007, federal prosecutors met with Epstein's attorneys. The government made an offer. If Epstein pled guilty to state charges, agreed to serve a minimum of 2 years in prison, and registered as a sex offender, the federal investigation would end. Epstein's lawyers countered. They wanted less time. They wanted more favorable conditions. They wanted immunity, not just for Epstein, but for others involved in his activities. Over the following months, the negotiations continued. According to the DOJ Office of Professional Responsibility report, released in November 2020, Epstein personally demanded that Marie Villafara be removed from the case. The pressure worked. While Villafara remained formally assigned, her supervisors took over the negotiations. On October 12, 2007, U.S. Attorney Alexander Acosta met personally with Epstein's lead attorney, Jay Lefkowitz, for breakfast at a hotel in West Palm Beach. According to emails later obtained through civil litigation, Lefkowitz wrote to Acosta after the meeting thanking him for the commitment you made to me during our October 12th meeting, and noting that Acosta had assured me that your office would not contact any of the identified individuals, potential witnesses, or potential civil claimants. In other words, Acosta allegedly promised that federal prosecutors would not contact the victims before finalizing the plea agreement. This was a direct violation of the Crime Victims' Rights Act of 2004, which requires prosecutors to confer with victims and keep them informed of plea negotiations. On September 24, 2007, one day before Marie Villafaya's team was prepared to seek a grand jury indictment, Jeffrey Epstein signed a non-prosecution agreement with the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of Florida. The agreement was extraordinary. The NPA granted immunity not just to Epstein, but to 4 named individuals and any potential co-conspirators. The named individuals were Sarah Kellen, Adriana Ross, Leslie Groff, Nadia Marcinkova. The federal government agreed not to pursue any federal criminal charges against Epstein in the Southern District of Florida. Instead of federal prosecution, Epstein would plead guilty to 2 state charges: solicitation of prostitution from a person under 18. Epstein would serve 18 months in the Palm Beach County Jail, not a federal prison. He would be eligible for work release, allowing him to leave the jail for up to 12 hours a day, 6 days a week. Most critically, the agreement was kept secret from the victims. Federal prosecutors did not notify them. They did not give them an opportunity to object. 20. This violated the Crime Victims' Rights Act. On June 30, 2008, Jeffrey Epstein pleaded guilty to the 2 state prostitution charges in Palm Beach County Court. He was sentenced to 18 months in county jail with work release. He was required to register as a sex offender. The victims were blindsided. They learned about it from news reports. 2 victims immediately filed a federal lawsuit challenging the non-prosecution agreement. They argued that the government's failure to notify them violated the Crime Victims' Rights Act. The Justice Department fought the lawsuit for more than a decade, arguing that the CVRA did not apply because no federal charges had been filed. Jeffrey Epstein reported to the Palm Beach County Jail on July 1, 2008. He was assigned to a private wing, separated from general population. He was granted work release almost immediately. Under the work release program, Epstein was allowed to leave the jail for up to 12 hours a day, 6 days a week. He was required to report to his office. Deputies from the Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office were assigned to monitor his movements, but the monitoring was minimal. 22. Investigative reporting later revealed that Epstein's work release was more vacation than punishment. He was seen coming and going from his office. He entertained visitors. He maintained his business operations. On July 22, 2009, after serving 13 months, Jeffrey Epstein was released from jail. He began a 1-year term of home detention, which in practice meant he could live at his Palm Beach mansion under nominal supervision. He registered as a sex offender as required, but he was free. He had avoided federal prosecution. He had served barely a year. He had protected his co-conspirators with blanket immunity. And for the next 10 years, from 2009 to 2019, he continued to live, travel, socialize, and, according to later allegations, abuse additional victims. The civil lawsuit filed by victims continued for more than a decade. Their attorneys fought to hold the government accountable. In 2018, the Miami Herald published a comprehensive investigative series by reporter Julie K. Brown. The series exposed the secret plea deal in detail. It identified victims. It documented the work release program. It revealed the extent of Epstein's connections. The series reignited public attention. It led to calls for Acosta's resignation. It pressured federal prosecutors to reopen the investigation. Finally, on February 21, 2019, U.S. District Judge Kenneth Mara ruled that federal prosecutors had violated the Crime Victims' Rights Act. He ruled that the government's failure to notify victims before finalizing the NPA was illegal. The judge wrote, "The government has made no attempt to explain its failure to confer with the victims." The court finds that the government's violation of the CVRA was clear, and the victims are entitled to relief. But what relief? Epstein's plea deal could not be easily undone. The statute of limitations on many federal charges had expired. The co-conspirators had immunity. The 2008 non-prosecution agreement named 4 women who were granted immunity: Sarah Kellen, Adriana Ross, Leslie Groff, and Nadia Marcinkova. But who were they? What were their roles in Epstein's operation? Sarah Kellen was born Sarah Lynn Kensington in 1979 in North Carolina. She was raised in a Jehovah's Witness family. She reportedly left the faith at age 17 and pursued modeling before entering Epstein's circle in the early 2000s. According to court documents and victim testimony, Kellen became one of Epstein's most trusted assistants. She lived at his Palm Beach mansion. She scheduled appointments. She greeted girls at the door. She escorted them to the bedroom where Epstein was waiting. Victim after victim described the same pattern. Sarah would answer the door. Sarah would lead them upstairs. Sarah would tell them what to do. Sarah would sometimes participate in the sexual encounters. During Ghislaine Maxwell's 2021 trial and 2022 sentencing, U.S. District Judge Allison Nathan described Kellen as a knowing participant in the criminal conspiracy and criminally responsible participant. But Sarah Kellen has never been charged with any crimes. She received immunity under the 2008 non-prosecution agreement. After Epstein's death in 2019, Kellen applied for and received compensation from the Epstein Victims Compensation Program. She asserted she was also a victim of his abuse. Today, Sarah Kellen works as an interior designer. She lives in Miami Beach. She has married a NASCAR driver. She has changed her name. She has rebuilt her life. She has never spoken publicly about her role in Epstein's operation. Nadia Marcinkova was born Nada Marcinkova in 1985 in eastern Slovakia. According to multiple sources, she was brought to the United States to live with Epstein when she was 14 years old, though her father has denied this. Epstein reportedly bragged to associates about having purchased Marcinkova from her family. Former MC2 bookkeeper Maritza Vasquez testified in a 2010 deposition that Epstein told people Marcinkova was his sex slave and that he had bought her from her parents in Yugoslavia for a large sum of money. Victim testimony from the Palm Beach investigation described Marcinkova as actively participating in sexual encounters with underage girls. Palm Beach police reports from 2005-2006 stated that Epstein would instruct Marcinkova to join in the sex acts with recruited victims. Marcinkova received immunity under the 2008 non-prosecution agreement. She has never been charged. In September 2019, CNN quoted Marcinkova's lawyer saying, "Like other victims, Nadia Marcinko is and has been severely traumatized. She needs time to process and make sense of what she has been through before she is able to speak out." Today, Nadia Marcinkova is an FAA certified commercial pilot and flight instructor. She founded a company called Aviloop that sells discounted flying lessons. She goes by the name Global Girl on social media. She has changed her surname to Marcinko. In January 2024, Nadia Marcinkova disappeared. Multiple news outlets reported she'd been missing since early January 2024. The Independent suggested her disappearance may be linked to the release of Epstein documents that same month. As of February 2026, her whereabouts remain unknown. Leslie Groff worked as Jeffrey Epstein's executive assistant for many years. She managed his New York office. She scheduled appointments. She coordinated travel. She handled logistics. According to victim testimony and court filings, Groff was described as managing the flow of girls to Epstein's properties. She allegedly maintained lists, coordinated schedules, and facilitated payments. Groff received immunity under the 2008 non-prosecution agreement. She has never been charged. Unlike Kellen and Marcinkova, relatively little information about Groff has surfaced in public documents. She has kept an even lower profile. She has not spoken publicly. Adriana Ross, also known as Adriana Mukinska, was a former model from Poland who worked at Epstein's Palm Beach mansion. She allegedly helped organize what victims described as Epstein's massage sessions. Flight logs show Ross frequently traveled on Epstein's private jet, including trips with former President Bill Clinton. In 2010, during depositions related to civil litigation, Ross was questioned about whether Prince Andrew participated in Epstein's alleged sex enterprise. She repeatedly invoked her Fifth Amendment rights and refused to answer. Ross received immunity under the 2008 non-prosecution agreement. She has never been charged. Little is known about her current whereabouts or activities. 4 women named as potential co-conspirators in a federal investigation, identified by dozens of victims as active participants in a sex trafficking operation, granted immunity in a secret deal that violated federal law. None of them has ever been charged with a crime. None of them has ever testified publicly about what they witnessed or what they did. None of them has faced accountability for their alleged role in facilitating the abuse of dozens, possibly hundreds of girls and young women. The question that haunts the Epstein case is not just about Epstein himself. It is about the network that enabled him, the people who recruited victims, the people who scheduled appointments, the people who greeted girls at the door, the people who participated in the abuse, the people who knew and did nothing. If Sarah Kellen was, as Judge Nathan described, criminally responsible, why was she never prosecuted? If Nadia Marcinkova participated in sexual encounters with underage victims, as police reports allege, why was she never charged? If Leslie Groff and Adriana Ross facilitated the operation, as victims testified, why were they granted immunity? The 2008 non-prosecution agreement did not just protect Jeffrey Epstein, it protected everyone involved in his operation. It ensured that the full story would never be told in a criminal courtroom. It ensured that co-conspirators would never face cross-examination. It ensured that the network would remain in shadows. One name appears repeatedly in Epstein's orbit, in victim testimony, in flight logs, and in investigative reporting: Jean-Luc Brunel. Jean-Luc Brunel was a French modeling agent who founded the agency, MC2 Model Management, in 2005, with reported financial backing of at least $1 million from Jeffrey Epstein. Brunel had a long history in the modeling industry. He gained prominence in the 1970s and 1980s, leading the international modeling agency Karen Models. He discovered models like Christy Turlington and Sharon Stone. He was well-connected, successful, powerful. He was also, for decades, the subject of allegations of sexual abuse. In 1988, CBS's *60 Minutes* aired an investigation into Brunel after multiple models accused him of drugging and raping them. The investigation, conducted by producer Craig Pies and reporter Diane Sawyer, documented a pattern of predatory behavior. Despite the 60 Minutes investigation, Brunel continued working in the industry. After being banned from his modeling agency in Europe following a 1999 BBC investigation, he moved to the United States in the early 2000s. That is when he met Jeffrey Epstein, likely through Ghislaine Maxwell, whom Brunel had known since the 1980s. In 2005, with Epstein's funding, Brunel launched MC2 Model Management. The agency had offices in New York, Miami, and Tel Aviv. It represented models who worked for major retailers including Nordstrom, Macy's, Saks Fifth Avenue, and Neiman Marcus. But according to victim testimony and investigative reporting, MC2 was more than a modeling agency. It was a pipeline. Virginia Giuffre, one of Epstein's most prominent accusers, alleged in court filings that the MC2 system was a cover for sex trafficking. She stated that Jean-Luc Brunel personally supplied Epstein with underage girls, and that she was trafficked to Brunel herself. Former MC2 bookkeeper Maritza Vasquez testified in a 2010 deposition that many of the girls who came to Epstein's properties worked for MC2. She confirmed that Epstein had invested money in the agency. She described Brunel housing models in Epstein's Manhattan apartments. Flight logs show Brunel was a frequent passenger on Epstein's private jet, often traveling with young models. One February 2005 flight from Columbus, Ohio to Palm Beach, Florida, listed 7 passengers: Epstein, Brunel, model Nadia Marcinkova, then 19, and 3 unnamed females. According to the fashion website Jezebel, which investigated MC2 in 2010, Brunel was still crisscrossing the globe, trawling for 5 feet 10, 13-year-olds from Eastern Europe and South America. The pattern was clear. Brunel recruited young girls, often from economically disadvantaged countries, often non-English speakers, under the guise of legitimate modeling opportunities. They were brought to the United States on modeling contracts. They were housed in Epstein's properties. They were introduced to Epstein's circle. Some became victims of sexual abuse. Some became recruiters themselves. Some disappeared from the industry entirely. In 2015, Brunel sued Epstein, claiming that he and MC2 had lost millions of dollars in revenue and lost multiple contracts because of their association with the convicted sex offender. The lawsuit alleged that Epstein had obstructed justice by directing Brunel to avoid having his deposition taken during the Palm Beach investigation. The lawsuit was later dismissed. After Epstein's death in August 2019, Brunel went into hiding. French authorities began investigating him for sex trafficking and rape of minors. In September 2019, French police searched Brunel's Paris home and offices. In December 2020, he was arrested at Charles de Gaulle Airport as he attempted to board a flight to Senegal. Brunel was held in La Santé prison in Paris. He was charged with rape of minors, sexual assault, criminal conspiracy, and human trafficking. Multiple women came forward with allegations spanning 3 decades. Brunel denied the charges. He claimed he was innocent. He claimed he was being scapegoated because of his association with Epstein. On February 19, 2022, Jean-Luc Brunel was found dead in his cell at La Santé prison. He had hanged himself. He was 76 years old. His death came shortly after Ghislaine Maxwell's conviction in December 2021. Prosecutors had hoped he would testify about the international scope of Epstein's operation. His death ensured he never would. Model advocate Carr Otis, who had spoken publicly about sexual abuse in the modeling industry, said after Brunel's death, "This is not the justice that we seek. This does not address the need for change. Jean-Luc is emblematic of a much bigger problem within our systems." Sarah Ziff, founder of Model Alliance, said, "Let's be clear. This is not about just one or even a few bad actors. This is also not simply about the past. Still today, modeling agencies remain largely unregulated, perpetuating the systemic sexual assault and trafficking of young women and girls across the globe." Jean-Luc Brunel never faced trial. He never testified about his relationship with Epstein. He never explained the MC2 operation. He never answered for the allegations that had followed him for 40 years. Like Epstein, he took his secrets to the grave. On July 6, 2019, Jeffrey Epstein was arrested at Teterboro Airport in New Jersey as he returned from Paris on his private jet. Federal prosecutors in the Southern District of New York charged him with sex trafficking of minors and conspiracy to commit sex trafficking. The charges covered conduct from 2002 to 2005 in New York and Florida, the same period covered by the 2008 Florida non-prosecution agreement. But prosecutors in New York concluded they were not bound by the Florida agreement. The agreement specified the Southern District of Florida. It did not bar prosecution in other districts. Epstein's lawyers immediately moved to dismiss the indictment, arguing that the non-prosecution agreement provided immunity. The court denied the motion. Epstein was detained at the Metropolitan Correctional Center in Manhattan. He was denied bail. He was placed on suicide watch after an apparent suicide attempt on July 23, 2019. 3 days after the suicide attempt, Epstein was removed from suicide watch. He was returned to a regular cell in a special housing unit. He was supposed to have a cellmate. He was supposed to be checked on by guards every 30 minutes. On August 10, 2019, at approximately 6:30 a.m., guards found Jeffrey Epstein unresponsive in his cell at the Metropolitan Correctional Center. He had hanged himself using a bedsheet. He was transported to New York Downtown Hospital, where he was pronounced dead at 7:36 a.m. The death immediately sparked conspiracy theories. How could a high-profile prisoner on suicide watch kill himself in a federal detention facility? Where were the guards? Why wasn't he being monitored? The Department of Justice Office of the Inspector General launched an investigation. The autopsy ruled the death a suicide by hanging. But questions remained. In June 2023, the OIG released its report. The findings were damning, not evidence of conspiracy, but evidence of profound institutional failure. The report found Epstein's cellmate had been transferred out of the cell the day before his death, leaving him alone in violation of facility policy. The 2 guards assigned to monitor Epstein's unit had both fallen asleep and had not checked on him for approximately 8 hours. The guards had falsified logs to make it appear they had conducted the required checks. Multiple security cameras in the area were not functioning properly. MCC staff had failed to follow procedures for high-profile inmates. The OIG report concluded, "We found that the MCC's failure to assign Epstein a cellmate, to monitor him adequately, and to follow suicide prevention protocols, combined with staff misconduct and a general culture of complacency, allowed Epstein to take his own life." 2 guards were criminally charged with falsifying records. They entered into a deferred prosecution agreement and avoided jail time. No one else was held accountable for the failures that allowed Jeffrey Epstein to die before facing trial. Epstein's death meant the criminal case against him ended. The charges were dismissed. There would be no trial. There would be no testimony from victims in a criminal courtroom. There would be no cross-examination of Epstein. There would be no public airing of evidence. The victims were devastated. Brad Edwards, an attorney representing dozens of Epstein's victims, said, "We have to live with the fact that he's not going to be held accountable the way he should have been held accountable." But the story did not end with Epstein's death. Federal prosecutors turned their attention to Ghislaine Maxwell. Ghislaine Maxwell was born on December 25, 1961, in Maisons-Laffitte, France. She was the youngest child of Robert Maxwell, a British media proprietor and member of Parliament. Robert Maxwell built a media empire that included the Daily Mirror newspaper and Macmillan Publishers. He was also, according to multiple sources, an asset for Israeli intelligence. In 1991, Robert Maxwell died under mysterious circumstances, falling from his yacht near the Canary Islands. His body was found floating in the Atlantic Ocean. An inquest ruled the death accidental, but questions remain. After his death, it was revealed that Robert Maxwell had embezzled hundreds of millions of pounds from his company's pension funds, leaving thousands of employees without retirement savings. Ghislaine Maxwell fled to the United States shortly after her father's death. That is when she met Jeffrey Epstein. According to multiple accounts, Maxwell and Epstein became romantic partners in the early 1990s. The romantic relationship eventually ended, but their partnership did not. Maxwell became Epstein's closest associate, his social facilitator, his recruiter, his accomplice. On July 2, 2020, nearly 1 year after Epstein's death, Ghislaine Maxwell was arrested at a secluded property in New Hampshire. She was indicted on 6 counts, 1. Conspiracy to entice minors to travel to engage in illegal sex acts. 2. Enticement of a minor to travel to engage in illegal sex acts. 3. Conspiracy to transport minors with intent to engage in criminal sexual activity. 4. Transportation of a minor with intent to engage in criminal sexual activity. 5. Sex trafficking conspiracy. 6. Sex trafficking of a minor. The charges covered conduct from 1994 to 2004, involving 4 victims. The indictment alleged that Maxwell befriended and groomed minor victims for abuse by Epstein, facilitated Epstein's abuse by recruiting, grooming, and ultimately abusing victims herself, participated in the abuse of victims, supervised and facilitated the operation that enabled Epstein to sexually abuse minors. Maxwell pleaded not guilty to all charges. She was denied bail and held at the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn. The trial began on November 29, 2021, in the U.S. District Court for the Southern District of New York. It lasted 4 weeks. 4 women testified. They were identified in court only by first names or pseudonyms: Jane, Kate, Carolyn, and Annie. Jane testified that she was 14 years old when she met Maxwell and Epstein at a summer camp in Michigan in 1994. Maxwell befriended her, gained her trust, and introduced her to Epstein. The abuse began shortly after. Jane testified that Maxwell was present during some of the sexual encounters. She described Maxwell participating in sexualized massages. She described Maxwell normalizing the abuse. Kate testified that she met Maxwell in Paris in 1994 when she was 17 years old. Maxwell presented herself as a mentor. She invited Kate to her townhouse in London. She introduced her to Epstein. Kate described Maxwell giving her a massage table and telling her Epstein needed a massage. She described being pressured into sexualized encounters. Carolyn testified that she was 14 years old when she began visiting Epstein's Palm Beach mansion in the early 2000s. She was recruited by another girl. She described Maxwell measuring her body, touching her breasts, telling her she had a great body for Epstein. She described receiving $300 per visit. She described being abused hundreds of times. Annie Farmer, Maria Farmer's younger sister, testified publicly under her real name. She waived her right to anonymity. She described the 1996 trip to Epstein's New Mexico ranch. She described Maxwell giving her a nude massage and groping her breasts. She was 16 years old. The testimony was detailed, specific, and consistent. The 4 women had not coordinated their stories. They had experienced abuse at different times, in different locations. But the patterns were the same: befriending, grooming, isolation, manipulation, normalization, abuse. Maxwell's defense argued that the women's memories were unreliable. They argued the women were motivated by money from the Epstein Victims Compensation Program. They argued Maxwell was being scapegoated for Epstein's crimes. On December 29, 2021, after 5 days of deliberation, the jury returned its verdict: guilty on 5 of 6 counts. Guilty of conspiracy to entice minors to travel to engage in illegal sex acts. Not guilty of enticement of a minor to travel to engage in illegal sex acts. Guilty of conspiracy to transport minors with intent to engage in criminal sexual activity. Guilty of transportation of a minor with intent to engage in criminal sexual activity. Guilty of sex trafficking conspiracy. Guilty of sex trafficking of a minor. On June 28, 2022, U.S. District Judge Allison Nathan sentenced Ghislaine Maxwell to 20 years in federal prison. She also imposed a $750,000 fine. At the sentencing hearing, several victims gave impact statements. Annie Farmer spoke. She said, "Ghislaine, like a wolf in sheep's clothing, she used her femininity to betray us, and she is a predator." Judge Nathan said, "The damage done to these young girls was incalculable." Ms. Maxwell directly and repeatedly, and over the course of many years, participated in a horrific scheme. Maxwell addressed the court. She did not apologize to the victims. She said, "It is the greatest regret of my life that I ever met Jeffrey Epstein." She said she hoped her conviction would bring closure to the victims. Ghislaine Maxwell is currently incarcerated at FCI Tallahassee, a low-security federal prison in Florida. Her projected release date is July 17, 2037. She will be 75 years old. She remains the only person other than Jeffrey Epstein to be convicted for crimes related to his sex trafficking operation. Virginia Roberts was born on August 9, 1983, in Sacramento, California. She had a difficult childhood years, instability, running away from home. At 16, she was living in Florida, working as a locker room attendant at Donald Trump's Mar-a-Lago club. That is where she met Ghislaine Maxwell in 2000. Maxwell approached her. Maxwell told her she knew someone who was looking for a traveling masseuse. Maxwell offered her opportunities, training, travel, money. Virginia accepted. She went to Epstein's Palm Beach mansion. The massage training was sexual abuse. She was 16 years old. For approximately 2 years, from 2000 to 2002, Virginia Giuffre, née Roberts, was trafficked by Epstein and Maxwell. She traveled on Epstein's private jet. She visited his properties in New York, Palm Beach, New Mexico, and the U.S. Virgin Islands. She was transported to London, Paris, and other international locations. She was, according to her testimony, forced to have sex with multiple men in Epstein's orbit. She alleged she was trafficked to Prince Andrew, Alan Dershowitz, and other powerful men. In 2002, at age 18, Virginia escaped. She met a man in Thailand. She married him. She moved to Australia. She started a new life. She had 3 children, but she could not forget what had happened to her. In 2009, Virginia Giuffre began speaking publicly about her experiences. She gave interviews. She filed lawsuits. She became one of the most prominent voices for Epstein's victims. In 2015, she filed a defamation lawsuit against Ghislaine Maxwell after Maxwell called her a liar. The lawsuit was settled in 2017. Prince Andrew denied the allegations. He gave a disastrous interview to BBC Newsnight in November 2019, in which he claimed he had no recollection of meeting Virginia Giuffre and offered bizarre alibis involving Pizza Express in Woking and an inability to sweat. In February 2022, Prince Andrew settled the lawsuit with Virginia Giuffre for an undisclosed sum, reported to be in the millions of pounds. The settlement included no admission of liability, but it included a statement acknowledging that Prince Andrew regrets his association with Epstein and accepts that she has suffered as an established victim of abuse. Virginia Giuffre's advocacy helped expose Epstein's operation. Her willingness to speak publicly, to testify, to fight in court, inspired other victims to come forward. She gave hundreds of interviews. She testified in multiple court proceedings. She wrote a memoir. On April 25, 2025, Virginia Giuffre died by suicide. She was 41 years old. Her family released a statement. "It is with profound sorrow that we share the tragic loss of our beloved Virginia." Virginia was a survivor who courageously stood up for herself and countless others who suffered abuse. While we will never fully understand the depth of her pain, we recognize that she fought valiantly for many years. We ask for privacy during this incredibly difficult time. The news devastated the survivor community. Attorney Brad Edwards, who who had represented Virginia and dozens of other Epstein victims, sighed, "Virginia was one of the bravest people I have ever known. She told her truth when no one would listen. She fought for justice when everyone told her it was impossible. Her death is a profound loss." In October 2025, 6 months after her death, Virginia Giuffre's posthumous memoir was published. The book, titled *Billionaire's Plaything, The Virginia Giuffre Story*, provided her account of the abuse she endured in the decades-long fight for justice. The memoir became a bestseller. It reignited public attention to the Epstein case. It reminded the world that the damage done to victims does not end when a perpetrator dies or goes to prison. The trauma continues. The pain continues. For some, like Virginia, the weight becomes unbearable. In February 2026, Virginia Giuffre's family, along with survivors and lawmakers, announced plans to introduce Virginia's law, federal legislation, that would extend statutes of limitations for sex trafficking cases, increase funding for victim support services, and mandate trauma-informed training for law enforcement and prosecutors. The proposed legislation would be named in Virginia's memory. It would seek to ensure that what happened to her and to the hundreds of other victims of Jeffrey Epstein never happens again. As of February 2026, the legislation is being drafted. Whether it will pass remains to be seen. In the months following Jeffrey Epstein's death in August 2019, public pressure mounted for the release of documents related to his case. Victims' advocates, journalists, and members of Congress demanded transparency. What did the government know? When did they know it? Why did they fail to act? In 2020 and 2021, courts began unsealing documents from civil litigation, deposition transcripts, flight logs, address books. Thousands of pages became public, but millions more remained sealed. Grand jury materials, FBI investigative files, intelligence agency records, classified documents. In 2024, Congress passed the Epstein Files Transparency Act. The legislation required the Department of Justice to review and release all documents related to Jeffrey Epstein's case, subject to redactions for national security, ongoing investigations, and privacy interests. The act set a timeline. All documents were to be released by December 2025. On December 19, 2025, the Department of Justice released the first batch of documents under the Transparency Act. The release included approximately 350 documents totaling about 900 pages. The documents included Maria Farmer's 1996 FBI complaint, correspondence between federal prosecutors and Epstein's lawyers, memoranda related to the 2008 non-prosecution agreement, flight logs and visitor logs, portions of FBI investigative files. The releases confirmed what many had suspected. The FBI had received credible reports about Epstein's crimes as early as 1996. Federal prosecutors had prepared a comprehensive federal indictment in 2007, but had instead negotiated a secret plea deal. Powerful people had visited Epstein's properties and traveled on his jet. But the releases also disappointed those hoping for a smoking gun. There was no client list. There was no evidence directly implicating additional individuals in criminal conduct. Much of the information had already been reported by investigative journalists, and the redactions were extensive. Names were blacked out. Entire paragraphs were removed. Key passages were marked classified or withheld for privacy. The file releases became a political football. Democrats accused the Trump administration of withholding documents to protect powerful Republicans. Republicans accused Democrats of selectively leaking information to damage political opponents. Congressman Robert Garcia, ranking member of the House Oversight Committee, demanded unredacted access for members of Congress. He argued that elected officials have a constitutional duty to conduct oversight, and that redactions were preventing accountability. Some members of Congress were granted access to unredacted files in a secure facility. Their reaction suggested the full documents contained more damaging information than what was publicly released. Senator Cynthia Lummis stated on February 9, 2026, "Now I see what the big deal is. And the members of Congress that have been pushing this were not wrong." Representative Jamie Raskin accused the Department of Justice of a cover-up. Public opinion polling conducted in January 2026 found that only 6% of Americans said they were satisfied with what the federal government had released. Nearly half of Republicans, 3/4 of independents, and 9 in 10 Democrats said the government was withholding information. The political pressure has not resulted in additional releases. As of February 2026, the Department of Justice has stated that it has fulfilled its obligations under the Transparency Act and that no further documents will be made public through this process. This has been an investigation into the documents themselves, not the myth of what they contain, not speculation about what remains hidden, but what actually exists in the public record. We know that Maria Farmer reported Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell to the FBI in 1996. No, the FBI classified her complaint as child pornography. We know the FBI did not follow up in any meaningful way for 10 years. We know that in 2006, the FBI opened an investigation in Florida after Palm Beach police requested federal intervention. We know that prosecutors prepared a federal indictment. We know that instead of pursuing that indictment, U.S. Attorney Alexander Acosta approved a non-prosecution agreement that allowed Epstein to plead guilty to minor state charges and granted immunity to his co-conspirators. We know that agreement was negotiated in secret and concealed from victims in violation of federal law. We know that violations were confirmed by a federal judge in 2019. We know that Epstein served 13 months in a county jail with work release privileges. We know he was released in 2009. We know that for the next 10 years, he continued to live freely, travel internationally, and maintain connections with powerful people. We know that in July 2019, he was finally arrested on serious federal charges by prosecutors in the Southern District of New York. We know he was detained at the Metropolitan Correctional Center. We know he died by suicide on August 10, 2019, under circumstances that reflected profound institutional failures. We know that Ghislaine Maxwell was convicted in December 2021 on 5 counts related to sex trafficking. We know she is serving a 20-year sentence. We know she is the only person other than Epstein to face federal prosecution for the crimes documented in millions of pages of evidence. We know that co-conspirators named in the 2008 non-prosecution agreement have never been charged. We know that other associates mentioned in victim testimony have never been prosecuted. We know that Jean-Luc Brunel, who allegedly ran a modeling agency that served as a pipeline for Epstein's operation, died by suicide in a Paris prison in February 2022 before facing trial. We know that millions of pages of documents have been released under the Epstein Files Transparency Act. We know those documents confirm associations, document communications, and detail the timeline of institutional failure. We know they do not contain a client list. We know they do not provide smoking gun evidence leading to new criminal charges. We know that substantial portions of the files remain unreleased. We know that grand jury materials remain sealed. We know that intelligence agency records, if they exist, remain classified. We know that Virginia Giuffre, who became one of the most prominent voices for survivors, died by suicide in April 2025. We know that her death came after decades of advocacy, legal battles, and public testimony. We know that she did not live to see full accountability. We know that Maria Farmer has filed a federal lawsuit against the U.S. government alleging negligence and failure to protect victims. We know that lawsuit is ongoing. We do not know why the FBI failed to act on Maria Farmer's 1996 complaint. We do not know what decisions were made, by whom, and under what pressures. We do not know the full extent of conversations between Epstein's lawyers and federal prosecutors during the negotiation of the 2008 non-prosecution agreement. We do not know what promises were made. We do not know what leverage Epstein possessed. We do not know how many victims were abused between 1996 and 2019. Estimates range from dozens to hundreds. The exact number may never be known. We do not know who else participated in the trafficking operation. We know the names of some associates. We know some recruited victims. We know some facilitated travel. We know some were present during abuse. But we do not know the full network. We do not know if intelligence agencies possessed information about Epstein's activities. We do not know if such information was used to protect him or to compromise others. We do not know if there will ever be additional prosecutions. We do not know if the sealed grand jury materials will be released. We do not know if the remaining documents will see the light of day. The Epstein case is a case study in institutional failure. It demonstrates how bureaucracy, complexity, and fragmented authority can prevent accountability even when evidence of serious crimes exists. It demonstrates how powerful individuals can manipulate legal systems designed to protect them, not their victims. It demonstrates how the protection of reputation, political calculation, and institutional self-interest can take precedence over justice. The failure was not the absence of evidence. The failure was the refusal to act on evidence that existed. The failure was not ignorance. The failure was willful blindness. The failure was not a single mistake. The failure was systematic, sustained, and multi-jurisdictional across decades. The release of millions of pages of documents has not produced the accountability victims deserve. It has produced confirmation of what many already believed, that Epstein operated with impunity for years, that powerful people knew or should have known, that law enforcement had opportunities to stop him and did not, that the system failed in ways that were both preventable and devastating. Maria Farmer filed her FBI complaint on September 3, 1996. 23 years later, Epstein was arrested on serious federal charges. 5 weeks after that, he was dead. In those 23 years, the system had countless opportunities to intervene. It did not. Asterisk, asterisk. The question is not whether we have enough documents. We have millions. The question is whether we have the will to acknowledge what they reveal and to demand the structural changes necessary to prevent similar failures in the future. Asterisk, asterisk. This concludes part 2 of the Epstein Files documentary investigation. The documents are public. The evidence is documented. The failures are clear. Asterisk, asterisk. What happens next depends on whether we are willing to do more than read. It depends on whether we are willing to act. Asterisk, asterisk.